Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm Fran Duffy, and we've got a fun show for you this week. Obviously, look, we're a couple weeks removed now from the Senior Bowl. We've got a couple weeks now to the Combine. So we're looking around the league. Who are people talking about? We'll dive into some mock drafts, some big boards this week. We're going to start at the very top. Mr. Relevant this week, our friend Dane Brugler from The Athletic is going to join the show, talk about his most recent mock draft that he dropped early this week. He's got the Eagles trading up in round one. So we'll talk about that with Dane at the top of the show, along with some players that he is higher on than most. After that, in Draft Buzz, myself, Chris McPherson, Ben Fennell, we're going to hammer through a bunch of different topics, a couple mock drafts, some big boards, some news around the league as well. So we'll hit on that in Draft Buzz. Pick 6 this week. 6 players that have eye-popping production, have some stats that really jump off the page to us. We'll hit on that in Pick 6. And then we've got some good questions from you at home as well in our draft mailbag. After that, that's it. That'll be the show. So the best way to support the show, as always, go on to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. Really appreciate everybody that has done so already. All that being said, let's jump into the top here. It's time for Mr. Relevant and our friend Dane Brugler.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Excited to welcome in this week on Mr. Relevant, our friend from The Athletic, Dane Brugler. You can follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. Dane, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Fran, it's always great to join you. Excited to get this thing. We're almost at the Combine, which is crazy.
But it's nuts.
It sneaks up on us every year, it seems like.
It really does. And, you know, the Senior Bowl obviously now in the books. You just released your most recent mock draft on Tuesday. You had the Eagles trading up a couple of picks here in the first round to select Arizona State wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. And so my first question for you is, tell Eagles fans not only why is Brandon Ayuk a first-round pick, but why would they be excited if the Eagles were to move up to select the senior from Arizona State?
Well, you know, he's definitely been one of the surprises this season. He was considered a late-round guy coming into the year, but it was mostly because the sample size just wasn't there. He was a corner first in high school, played a little bit of receiver. Then he went to the JUCO level because of grades, went to offense full-time at the JUCO level, and turned himself into a pretty highly rated recruit. Arizona State was the first Power 5 offer that he got, and he stayed loyal to the Sun Devils even when Alabama and a few other SEC programs kind of entered the picture late. Last year kind of spent first half of the year getting acclimated with the offense. He was stuck in the shadow of N'Keal Harry. But this year he had a chance to break out, and he did. He blossomed as the go-to weapon for Arizona State. And I think the main reason to be excited about him is just the ability after the catch. He is a yak monster, and love the way he'll accelerate through the catch. He'll hit his top speed. He'll eliminate pursuit angles. That explosive speed, the ball tracking, the length, those are the traits that NFL teams will fall in love with at the receiver position. So he's a runway athlete. You give him any type of runway, even as simple as a slant pattern, and he's going to turn a single into a home run. So I know there's going to be plenty of Eagles fans who probably frown at the thought of trading up maybe in the top 20 to go get him. But he's got top 20 buzz around the league. And so I think this trade in my mock would be very similar to last year's first round when the Eagles saw a chance to trade up a few spots and get a guy that they really wanted in an Andre Dillard. And I think it could be similar in that type of scenario with a Brandon Ayuk, an offensive playmaker that can really add another dimension to that offense.
Yeah, and he was obviously, screens, slants, shallow crosses. He was outstanding, but also showed the ability to track the deep ball over the shoulder as well. I thought that, in flashes, he was able to do that at a very high level. Brandon Ayuk, very, very intriguing player. So, Dane, you know it, and all the listeners know it. Every time we bring a guest onto the show, I like talking to people about players that they feel that they are higher on than most. And so I asked you ahead of time, who are a few of those guys? And we're going to start with the LSU left tackle, Sadiq Charles. Not a guy that a lot of people have gotten a lot of information on. I know Ben has talked about him a couple of times here on the show. What are your thoughts on Sadiq Charles?
This is one of, if not the most intriguing evaluations in this draft class. He is a really gifted mover, light feet. He can play on an island, plays with a decent anchor. Soccer was his first love, and he was an all-state goalie as a senior in high school. Plus, he set a state record in the shot put. So this is just a really talented dude. He's very unique. Played defensive line most of high school until an injury. Late his junior year, they moved him to left tackle, and he played so well that they moved him there full time as a senior, and that's when he really blew up as a recruit. So he became the first true freshman offensive lineman to start the season opener at LSU, and he's been pretty much a mainstay in the lineup ever since. A 3-year starter, produced some really impressive tape. I think based on just the movement skills, the upside, he is a top 50 talent. However, there are a lot of red flags with this player, and it's going to be an issue for a lot of teams. He was suspended 6 games this year, multiple failed drug tests in his background, just a lot of maturity issues. That's what it comes down to. And there are a lot of people that have kind of gotten into his ear and said, listen, you got to straighten out because you are really talented. You have a high ceiling in the NFL. You need to grow up. And it's going to be really interesting to see how teams will treat him throughout the process. If they fall in love with the traits and ignore the rest, but they're really going to have to do their homework on this kid. Supreme talent. He's still only 20 years old. Wow. They need to figure him out, if he can be reliable or not, and how that's going to cloud the projection.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we saw a couple of those Bayou Bengal offensive linemen down in Mobile. Cushenberry had a good week, and Damian Lewis had his highs as well down there at the Senior Bowl. All right, let's stay in the trenches. Let's stay in the SEC. A guy that we've talked a little bit about on this show, and that's Jordan Elliott, the defensive tackle from Missouri. He's a guy I know you're also high on.
Yeah, we're not talking enough about Jordan Elliott. 6'4", 315 pounds, and he's going to test really well. He can cross the face of blockers, overwhelm defenders with his burst, his power. He's got the length where he can snatch, press blockers off his frame. The ability in pursuit is something that routinely showed up on his tape as well. I mean, he looked like a linebacker taking out some of those screen passes when I watched him on film. He was a big-time recruit, spent 1 year at Texas, then transferred over to Missouri. This past year, it was his kind of first full year as a starter, and he led the team with 10 tackles for loss. So talent is not the question with this player. It's more about, can he stay in shape, stay dependable, and if he does those things, he's going to be a long-time starter in this league. And it's interesting because you have Derek Brown, Javon Kinlaw. That makes up the top tier in the defensive tackle rankings. And I don't know too many that disagree with that, but that second tier of the defensive tackles, that's where there's going to be a lot of variety when you talk to different people. Neville Gallimore from Oklahoma, Blacklock from TCU, Matabuke from A&M. There's a lot of different names in that second tier, but I think Elliott might be the best of that second tier, could be that third defensive tackle off the board.
Interesting. Raekwon Davis from Alabama, certainly in that mix. There's a handful. Marlon Davidson from Auburn as well. A bunch of guys that are going to be thrown into that mix of defensive tackle. Dane, if somebody were to ask me, hey, who are Dane Brugler's favorite players in this draft? I think the first guy that would come to mind would be the Dayton tight end, Adam Troutman. You've been pounding the drum for this kid really for as long as I can remember, going back to late in the summer. Tell us about Adam Troutman and why you're so high on him. Obviously had a very good week down in Mobile. Got a lot of buzz for his performance at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, and when you watched him on film, he was the best athlete on the field, and you would somewhat expect that from a player with his talent, playing at the FCS level against subpar competition. But my hot take leaving Mobile, leaving the Senior Bowl, is I really think Troutman did enough where he's going to earn tight end 1 consideration from a lot of teams in this draft. The athleticism, it routinely showed up during drills, both as a route runner and then at the catch point. He's a player who never caught a pass in his life until he got to Dayton. He was a quarterback his entire life, and even though he did not grow up catching passes, he shows pretty natural ball skills. He can track, he can adjust, he can finish, and he did well as a blocker as well. So the temperament for dirty work, I think that shows. And every time I talk to him, I walk away feeling that he's the type of competitor that I want on my team. So it also helps. This isn't a great tight end class, especially at the top when you've got Notre Dame's Cole Kmet. I think he has a bright future ahead of him. He's a possible top 60 pick, but I would not be surprised at all if Troutman ends up being that first tight end off the board somewhere in round 2.
Yeah, and the other small school kid that got some buzz down in Mobile that I know you want to talk about is Kyle Duggar, the safety from Lenoir-Rhyne, Division II. What are your thoughts on Kyle Duggar?
Well, and I just mentioned how Troutman, I think, belongs in round 2, and Duggar does too. Classic late bloomer, undersized in high school, didn't receive better than Division II offers, but he goes to Lenoir-Rhyne and he blossoms. And it's a smaller school in North Carolina. He's big, he's fast, he's physical, and he's a smart player. I've talked to teams who see him as a weak side linebacker. Other teams want him at safety, but he dominated that Division II tape, which is what you would expect from a player with his talent. But he was also up to the challenge at the Senior Bowl. He certainly showed why he belonged. He left Mobile with as much buzz as anyone, and I think that'll continue at the Combine because he's also going to show out as a tester for a guy that size, that talent. I'm really excited to see the numbers that he puts up at 6'1", 217 pounds. I'm really excited about Duggar and what he's going to be at the NFL level.
There's some Mark Barron there from Alabama when he was coming. He was a top 10 pick for the Crimson Tide to the Tampa Bay Bucks. But Kyle Duggar, certainly a very, very intriguing player. I watched him over the summer. Came away really, really interested to see how he would continue to develop, and he has done that in his senior season. I was a little bit banged up this year, but a guy that certainly has all the tools. Last question for you, Dana. These were all very bold statements. I'm going to ask you for one more. What's one guy? We're getting closer to the Combine, a couple weeks away from our trip to Indianapolis. Who's a guy that we're not talking about right now that's going to be at the forefront of everybody's mind, right after that trip to Indianapolis, that's going to shock people with how he tests or how he performs at Lucas Oil Stadium?
I'll give you 2 guys, and
okay.
I'm not saying that I'm super high on them, but I do think that, kind of like what you said, we'll be talking more about them after they test. Donovan Peoples-Jones from Michigan.
Okay.
I mean, he was a consensus 5-star guy, 6'2", 215. He's probably going to run in the mid 4.4s in the 40. He's going to jump really well. So the big time workout numbers could make him from a maybe a day 2 pick to squarely a day 2 pick. And then Ezra Cleveland, offensive tackle at Boise State. Talking to some other players at Boise, they say that Cleveland was the best athlete on the team, and that should show at the Combine. So I think he's another guy who is going to go from, probably a day 2 pick to, definitely a day 2 pick, maybe get in that top 50 conversation, maybe get in that second tier of the offensive tackle class after he tests and teams see him move. And I think that'll really help him with his evaluation.
Yeah, he's a guy. I have not done Cleveland yet, but I know Donovan Peoples-Jones, a lot of people excited about what he can do from an athleticism standpoint. Well, Dane, appreciate the time. It's a busy, busy time of year for you. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to spend with us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. We will see you out in Indy. And again, you can follow Dane on Twitter at DP Brugler. Does a great job covering college football and the NFL draft for The Athletic. Dane, we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, can't wait. Thanks, friend.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, now as we transition to our Draft Buzz segment, we're going to start at the top, like we always do. Chris McPherson on my left, Ben Fennell on my right. Guys, let's go with our Through the Grapevine segment, where just a couple interesting items. And Daniel Jeremiah said on one of his more recent podcasts, on the Move the Six podcast, which you can listen to wherever podcasts are available, there's been a lot of chatter connecting the Detroit Lions and quarterback Justin Herbert. Look, after the Senior Bowl performance, I think we kind of said, all right, he's going to be a lock for that top 10. The Lions at number 3, here's the way I look at it. Yeah, the interest might be real, but also I kind of wonder if they're maybe striking up a little bit of a trade because they want someone to try and jump them, get to number 2 so that Chase Young can follow them at number 3.
There's really no sense in sitting there at 3 to take a corner, to be honest with you.
Right.
Everybody's in every mock draft obviously has a CUDA going there. Yep. They need some help on the outside. There's no sense in sitting there at 3. Someone should jump up, get the quarterback they want, whether it's somebody to go get Tua, Herbert. Yep. This is the smokescreen that they should be playing, that the Bengals should be playing, and mixing and swirling the doubts in the air to see what type of offers maybe teams would want to come get their guy.
Because everyone knows that Washington, if there's one place where they're strong, they've spent first-round pick after first-round pick after first-round pick on that defensive front. So, yeah, you take Chase Young. If you're the Redskins, you take him. But if you get an offer, they say, like, all right, if a team's trying to move up to get Herbert or Tua or whoever, you're going to take that offer, get all those picks. To me, that's what you're trying to do if you're Detroit, to say, all right, hey, we're going to take Herbert at 3 if he's there, try and get somebody else to jump them so that they can take Chase Young.
And the interesting thing, as much as I just heard that kind of Herbert news in the Lions over the past 2 days, I've also heard some interest with the Lions jumping to 2.
Interesting.
Because they really want Chase Young.
See, this all right, so there we go.
The Redskins' defensive line is arguably the best part of their team right now.
Yep.
You need a franchise tackle to go with Dwayne Haskins.
Yep.
So maybe Chase Young at 2 to the Redskins isn't the right fit there as well. So there's a lot of kind of mixing and swirling right now, and we're in it.
Do you pass up on Chase Young, though? Even if you have invested all those resources.
That's the kind of conversation.
It's great.
That's already the deepest part of your team. You add to it with already a lot of other needs. You clearly need a left tackle of the future there for the Redskins that you could get maybe, in the 8, 9, 10 spot of the draft. Do you really need to be there at 2 for Chase Young? Can you maybe get 2 first-round picks out of that?
Exactly.
That's a different story. Now, what's interesting, when we were at the Senior Bowl, Fran, we did the Senior Bowl only mock draft.
Yes.
And I had the Lions taking, it was Jordan Love because Herbert was off the board at that point. Because I thought maybe at this point, you're picking this high, you're at number 3, you look to the future a little bit. Matthew Stafford's been in the league since 2009. Maybe this is your chance to get the next guy. The only caveat, though, along the same lines with creating the smokescreen about it, is ownership has basically said they have to win this year.
Yeah.
They've got to win in 2020. You're not winning with Justin Herbert, most likely, in year 1. Stafford's going to give you the best chance of that.
And we've said numerous times on this show, it used to be that, taking a quarterback in the first round buys you time as
not anymore.
That's not the case anymore. That's gone.
Look at the Giants.
Yeah, exactly. You look. There's case after case, year after year, going back to Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. Like, year 1, you don't have that success, you're gone. We're going to find somebody to come in and play with this young quarterback. So certainly something interesting. Not a huge impact on the Eagles, but certainly on the NFC East. And I thought that was an interesting one to kind of start things off. Todd McShay put out his new big board, and we're not going to use it for the big board breakdown, but there was one interesting thing kind of going through that where Todd McShay talked about Henry Ruggs. And Ben, I want you to get your thoughts on this. He wrote that the receiver is a burner who explodes off the line of scrimmage and is savvy in his route running. He is not afraid to work over the middle of the field, but Ruggs needs to build strength to generate better late separation. What are your thoughts hearing that from Todd McShay from ESPN?
He does struggle at times within his route running. I don't know if it's necessarily a strength thing. I don't know if it's necessarily a late separation thing.
Yeah. There
is some lack of nuance into his route running. It's a lot of quick game stuff. It wasn't a lot of deep down the field stuff. It wasn't a lot of intermediate routes. I don't think he ran a comeback in his career at Alabama.
That's what. So when you say the deep down the field stuff, it's not that he wasn't used vertically. It was just deep post, deep go routes, not like deep digs and comebacks and things like that.
The bang post, the digs, the comebacks, the intermediate deep 5 to 7 step routes with timing routes you would run in the NFL. You didn't really run at Alabama. There's a lot of quick games, RPO stuff, and then the shot plays off play action. I don't know if it was a play strength aspect, but he definitely has something to work in with his route running, but that's really not what you should ask him to do. It's like Deebo Samuel. If you put him outside the numbers with the 49ers and said win, it's your fault, not his.
Right.
Don't put Henry Ruggs in that position to have to win. Put him over the middle of the field, slot, gadget, put the ball in his hands, and let him do what he does well, and that's wake up in the morning and run 4-2.
Yeah, I think when you deal with I think receivers, whether it's inside or outside, I think you got to be able to show the ability to play through contact from snap to whistle, right? So like early in the down, line of scrimmage, beat press coverage. And we saw Deebo Samuel, that slant route that he caught in the Super Bowl, that release off press, like thing of beauty. Like that was aces. That's exactly how it should look. But play through contact early, play through contact mid-route. So I think that's kind of what Todd's talking here. And then playing through contact at the catch point. Can you hold on to the football, take a hit? Because look, in the NFL, everybody's faster, everybody's bigger, everybody's stronger. You're going to have to deal with contact in all areas of the field. To me, watching receivers over the last few years, that's an area where I'm like, man, like I think I need my guy to be able to play through contact. So him kind of bringing that up, I think is an interesting point.
And I think there's two ways to kind of talk about that, and being a alpha dog type of receiver and playing with that confidence and that, for lack of a better word, swagger.
Yep.
And then actually being strong.
Yeah.
Henry Ruggs is 6 foot, 190 pounds.
Yep.
He's a small receiver. It just is what it is. There's going to be some corners that tower over him. There's going to be some corners that smother him.
Yep.
I think he has enough of that pedigree, that alpha mentality, that toughness, in that he's wired that right way, that he's going to compete. And there are going to be some corners that are stronger than him.
Yeah.
He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. It is what it is. That's why he runs 4.2. That's why he's electric fast. You want a 6'3 receiver, 220, to go have some good play strength? there's going to be some cons with that style of receiver as well.
Yeah, no question.
That's the thing. He's got the speed. You see on tape what he can do. He's a yak monster.
Yep.
Scheme for it. The biggest thing. You talked about Kyle Shanahan, Deebo Samuel. You scheme for that, okay? And hopefully you coach them up. Everyone's going to come in with something they need to work on, all right? So you talked about the lack of the route tree. Okay, as bugs are flying in the studio here. You talk about the lack of a route tree. Okay, that's stuff that you'll get coached up on at the next level. But you know that going into it. It's almost like don't discount the talent, just figure out ways to utilize it to its best ability.
Yeah, every player in this draft, we talk about this all the time, Ben, when we're watching film, is like every player has flaws, every player has strengths. It's about leveraging those strengths and hiding those weaknesses. We talk about all the time at every position, not just receiver. Every player in this draft is not perfect, or else they'd all be number 1, number 2 picks. Otherwise, that's what we're kind of looking at is what are these guys' flaws and how do we mask them? How do we massage them?
Listen, if Henry Ruggs shows up at the combine and runs 4.25, and then you're gonna be like, well, it's play strength. Shut up. He runs 4.25. Put him in positions to run 4.25.
Exactly.
Right.
Nobody looks at Deshaun and is like, all right, well, his play strength. Like, I don't know if he's going to run a comeback against a press corner. Like, what about that? Don't have him do that.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And kind of a little bit of a bridge here to the next point. I want to talk about this topic. I was going through Pro Football Focus's their positional rankings for the NFL draft. They do a great job. We had Mike Renner on from PFF a few weeks back, just going through what they do from College Football Focus. And no shock, I looked at the D tackle rankings. They had Derek Brown as number 1. They have Marlon Davidson, his teammate, as the number 4. Now, Marlon Davidson played as a defensive end mostly. He was a heavy DN. I want to say he was playing around like 270, 280. He came into the Senior Bowl close to 300 and is now moving inside to D tackle. You watch him in one-on-ones. He lined up at 7 tech, 5 tech, 3 tech, 1 tech. He lined up and down the line of scrimmage before that ankle injury took him out for most of the week in Mobile. They had Javon Kinlaw at number 2, and then Elliott, the Mizzou kid, at number 3. We talked about him earlier with Dane. But just going back to Marlon Davidson, what are your thoughts on Dave? I want to feel like I kind of view him differently in a different scope now, as a undersized, like high energy 3 tech, as opposed to a heavy DN that I'm like, I don't know how much juice he's giving you off the edge on passing downs.
His trajectory is very similar in his style of play, very similar to LJ Collier last year.
Yeah, okay.
I thought he showed up to the Senior Bowl, looked like a stud power rusher.
Yep.
Little heavy, doesn't really have the hip flexibility, the bend, the win high side. Everybody's like, he'll slide into 3 tech, ended up being, I think, a late first-round pick to the Seahawks.
Yep.
Ended up being a 10 rookie is what I call him. He's a 10% player. Barely could get on the field. I think he struggled with some injuries, was buried on the depth chart.
What's that term?
A 10 player, a 10 rookie. And that's just a guy that really didn't give you that contribution you needed. He was a minimal player, role player, 10% play time type of rookie. I worry the same thing with Davidson in that I worry about his play strength on the inside. I like him, obviously, against guards and being that kind of edge player to slide inside, but I don't think he could be that productive on the outside. I don't think he can win high side. He struggles with speed, obviously, but that's really not his game. I think figuring out where you're going to play him at the next level is interesting.
Yeah.
Even the Draft Network, I think, has him as their 4th D tackle, and he's listed as edge with all the D tackles.
Right.
So there's a lot of like how you're viewing him as a prospect.
Yeah. What I love about him, he's got an outstanding motor. Very violent. He's good with his hands. He's a smart player. I thought his play recognition skills against things like the screen and just those quick games. He's out chasing things to the flat. He's just a high energy player and he's violent. So to me, like it's almost similar, C-Mac, to when we were watching. It's very ironic because it's the opposite switch. Jason Strowbridge from North Carolina was one of the best 5 players over the week of practice. Now, Strowbridge played as a D tackle at North Carolina. He goes to the Senior Bowl, and he plays strictly as an edge guy, and he came in at 260, 265, and was like, oh man, like watch this guy go and play around. And he was outstanding in Mobile. So a guy making a different kind of switch. But I think when you look at Davidson, like I like guys that bring that kind of mentality, and I think he's strong enough that he can play on the inside and be a player.
Do you wish that he stayed at 275 and didn't gain the weight and just became a versatile hybrid player where he can come off the edge? I mean, he would line up in like a 2-point stance. Yeah. It's something to watch when he played at Auburn, coming off the edge there. But then he had situations where he could move inside. where he's that type of player at the NFL, or is it the fact that you're concerned about the juice that he's going to bring off the edge? Where
players from Auburn as well, like Nick Coe.
Yeah, he didn't really play much this year.
No, who played on the outside that I thought was more suited for the inside. Montravis Adams a couple years ago.
Sure.
Inside, outside versatility, stuck with being an inside player, and it's really stuck in no man's land with the Packers and being a somewhat of a run plugger with a little bit of twitch as a 3-tech, and I'm afraid that's what Davidson's going to turn into.
Yeah, I think when ultimately, if you're Davidson, I like the idea of, all right, I'm going to put on the weight, show people that I can do it. I can go be a full-time player inside, whereas opposed to if he were to just be a heavy D end, you're kind of pigeonholed as a heavy D end that maybe slides inside. Now you're going to be situation based. Like I like the idea of, you know what, I'm going all in. I'm going to be a 3-tech, and if you want me to play D end, I can lose the weight. I can go and say I can play there on rundowns, but I'm going to show that I can play as a defensive tackle. I want to see how he moves.
If he's tough and physical, he's a run stuffer.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we all want guys who can penetrate and get to the quarterback. There's not too many of those. They're coming from the defensive tackle position, so it's playing to his strengths.
Yep.
And seeing what he was able to do at Auburn, and then it'll be interesting to see the projection of how teams view him at the next level.
To me, this is a great transition to the last topic I want to hit on through the grapevine, and that's Ben. You're back and forth a little bit with Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl about just those undersized edge guys, the linebacker DN hybrids, right? And I think it's about what can this guy do? What did he do in college? And now, what is he going to do in the NFL? Just take us through just the kind of player that we're talking about and the prospects we're mentioning in this discussion.
So there's been a lot of these types of players over the past couple of years. It's the undersized defensive ends, edges in college that clearly are undersized for the NFL.
Yep.
What do you do with them? Everybody says, they'll go play off ball and then go rush a passer on third down. Very much like Hassan Reddick did at Temple. Yep. Undersized guy, explosive, played off ball at the Senior Bowl, first-round pick to the Cardinals. And that's kind of the projection that a lot of people have with these players. So we're talking Zach Bond at Wisconsin, Josh Uche, Bryce Huff at Memphis, Cam Gill at Wagner, Alex Highsmith at Charlotte, Carter Coughlin's undersized. There's a bunch of guys like this.
Yep.
So it's figuring out, are you a 4-3 Sam? Are you a 3-4 Leo outside linebacker? Can you play a 4-3 defensive end? Are you just a sub-package player? So it's just figuring out, what do you do with these players? And whether it's first-team All-American last year, Sutton Smith, Jannard Avery out of Memphis a couple years ago, Marquise Haynes, Eric Stryker, Agbenyana out of Oklahoma. Tons of examples of these players over the past couple of years. I hope they turn into Elvis Dumervil, who was 5'11", 235. Or I hope they turn into a Robert Mathis, who was 6'1", 240 out of Alabama A&M 15 years ago.
Yep.
But we need to talk about fit and size. And are you a hybrid? Are you a tweener? Where you play them? And the question that Nagy posed was, why am I not seeing first-round buzz about Josh Uche? I love Josh Uche. This podcast,
you've talked about
every opportunity I got to talk about Josh Uche, I wanted to.
Yep.
But I just want to paint the full picture for people. Why are we not seeing it? I said why. He's clearly a tweener size-wise. He's clearly in between positions. What do you do with him? Let's have a conversation. And that's all I was trying to do, was paint the full picture. I'm a huge fan of his game.
Right, of course.
I just want to paint the full picture. I know he's a Senior Bowl guy. Jim wants to endorse his guys, promote his guys the best he can.
Certainly.
But I just don't want to fanboy about these guys, and let's paint the full picture for people out there and to say, you know what, he's a good player. There's some hesitation because of X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
Let's talk about it.
Well, that's what I started thinking this morning, actually, before we started recording. I was like, who are the guys? Because we're talking about, how we're going to talk about this in the podcast. And I was like, who are the guys in the NFL that are used that way? Because I feel like we have those conversations every year of, he's going to play off ball to start, and then third down, we're going to rush him. So like, I just went through each team and just thought, like, all right, who are some guys? Lorenzo Alexander, to me, is the guy that most of these players, you want to be what Lorenzo Alexander's. And by the way, he didn't turn into that guy until the twilight of his career, really.
Took him time,
It took him a lot of time to get there, but has turned into a very effective player out in Buffalo.
Recently retired.
Yeah, right. No question. So I think you look at Lorenzo.
He did retire.
I didn't even see that. But off the ball to start, and then, hey, he's going to come down. He's going to play 3 technique. He's going to play D-end on passing downs and be that guy. Dante Hightower, New England. Kyle Van Noy. You mentioned Jannard Avery. Anthony Barr is certainly one of those guys for the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings. Jamie Collins has been that throughout his career. You mentioned Clay Matthews in Green Bay was that for a good chunk of his career. Rashaan Evans right now in Tennessee has been that guy. Bernardrick McKinney in Houston. Vic Beasley in Atlanta has kind of moved back and forth. Michael Kendricks has been that for Seattle. Shaq Griffin as well for Seattle. Jalen Smith has been that for Dallas as well. So it's not a long list, but there are certainly cases where you see that. Some are very high profile guys, the Anthony Barrs, the Jalen Smiths, the Jamie Collins. Some of those guys are high profile, some of them a little bit under the radar, but to me, it's going to come down to every scheme is different, and how those guys, what is Josh Uche for Team A is not going to be what he is for Team B or Team C. Right. That's going to be interesting. If you're trying to project in mock drafts or just kind of thinking through, it'll be interesting to see how everybody views them.
And at the end of the day, why are we having these conversations? Because these players are terrors in college.
Right.
Zach Bond has 20 TFLs and 15 sacks. Sutton Smith, Northern Illinois, first-team All-American. I think he had back-to-back 20-sack seasons. He was 5'11", 230.
And he got drafted in like the 6th round, and he signed a futures contract with like New Orleans last week.
Right.
Like, I mean, he didn't stick as a rookie.
And we said before Senior Bowl week, Josh Uche is going to terrorize one-on-ones because they're awkward size edge rushers.
Right.
Explosive, undersized. If you're a big 6'6", 6'7" tackle, the strike zone in their torso first of all, it's small. It's far away. It's an awkward positioning. Going to O-line masterminds and talking about why some guys like Aaron Donald are terrors, he's 6 feet tall.
Yep.
Going against a 6'4" guard, the strike zone is completely different on how you attack these players. Josh Uche swooped under a lot of hands and punches the tackles the whole week.
Yep.
So it looked like he had really good bend and flexibility to go with some play strength. He looks like a freak show. He looks like a first-round pick.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting dynamic when talking about that position. And, I think now one of the terms that's being thrown around, offense and defense, is positionless football. We hear it in baseball, we hear it in basketball. And I think in football, front seven, you're starting to see that a lot. It's a lot of schemes around the league where guys are lining up. They're lining up here, they're lining up there, they're lining up here. You see it in the secondary as well with guys like the kid from the Chargers from Florida State, the safety, Derwin James.
Right.
Thank you. You see it with all these guys. The Honey Badgers the same way. They line up in a million different spots. It's an interesting kind of dynamic to kind of follow here.
You want to get to the quarterback.
Yes.
And Josh Uche can do that.
Yep.
And I think that's what Jim Nagy is saying is like, look at this trait that's so valuable. We talk about how do you build a football team. You want to be able to get to the quarterback. He can do that.
Yeah.
But as you said, Ben, and I think rightfully so, that's not everything.
Right.
That's not the full package there.
Yep.
So,
And can he turn into a Joe Schobert who ended up being a great off-ball backer?
Right.
Maybe, yes. He could.
I mean, Teddy Bruschi was that. Teddy Bruschi was at Arizona State.
England,
Yeah.
He turns into a Van Noy. Great.
Yep.
Van Noy also struggled with Detroit earlier in his career because he was a jack of all trades, master of none. If you don't have plans for these guys as well,
Yep.
their careers can really fizzle as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. All right, let's move on to our next topic here, our film room recap. And I'm going to kick things off for this one. Ben, you've been singing the praises of Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver from LSU, for the last few months. And the comparison you used pretty consistently was Keenan Allen. I think a few more people now are starting to pick up on that one. Dude, you couldn't have been more right. Like, I watched him late last week. He's really impressive, man. All he does is separate. Everything is deliberate. Like, every step in his route is with a purpose. He's got subtle quickness inside, in and out of routes. He's really good at the catch point. He catches everything. Deep, vertical, quick game. He's tough. Mostly in the slot for LSU. That was how he was used this year. But, man, I loved watching Justin Jefferson. This receiving class is so good. And Jefferson is one of those names, to me, different skill set. You comparing him to Henry Ruggs, to Laviska Shenault, it's apples to oranges, but man, Justin Jefferson is a really, really impressive player. I really enjoyed watching him.
Not to mention the play style, but just the aesthetics of his play and position. He's a tall, upright slot receiver. Those really don't exist. There aren't many of those types of players to choose from. I mean, Tyler Boyd, those types of guys. His stance, the way his hands, the way he bends his knees on his release. He just looks like Keenan Allen, the way his arms hang, in and out of breaks, releases. Such a Keenan Allen type of player. It was easy to see, in my opinion.
The guy, it was weird. The guy that I thought of watching him doesn't play receiver. He doesn't play offense. I started thinking of Chandler Jones. Like, he's long and gangly and just is always loose. Like, he's just always staying clean. Like,
loose.
Like, he's always creating separation. Chandler Jones, no tackle can get a hand on this guy. And Justin Jefferson, I'm looking at him like, he didn't see a ton of press coverage in the slot, But like it was just we talked earlier about playing through contact. Like Justin Jefferson played through contact from snap to whistle and was just consistent across the board. I don't know what he's going to run. He might run.
Some people are questioning his long speed.
He might run 4.56 or something like that. Honestly, I don't care. Like as long as he doesn't run like 4.7, 4.8, like Justin Jefferson to me is going to be a top 40, top 50.
And just a quick elevator speech. How different is Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, it's a good question.
They're going to look pretty similar on the combine field.
I'm honest.
If you put ski masks on them, they're going to look, their body movements, the way their arms hang, the way they're cut, their legs, their movement patterns, their testing, their long speed, their strides, the way they sink their hips in and out of breaks. They're like clones. Now, I think CeeDee's a little more electric with the ball in his hands, returner style.
Yeah,
I think Justin's a little bit better at the catch point.
Yep.
But I think they're pretty similar players. I don't think we really kind of grasped that how close they are as prospects.
Yeah, C-Mac, I'm doing I'm writing up the combine preview articles, and so I'm doing the receiver position because the receivers are one of the first positions to work out. And I'm trying to pick, every year I try and pick who's the guy that I say trust the tape. Like, he's not going to test super well, but the guy's a good football player. I could have put CeeDee Lamb in there. I could have put Justin Jefferson in there. Honestly, I don't even know, is Judy going to run, as well as we all think at 180 pounds? I don't know if he's going to run. He's going to run well. I don't know that he's going to put up numbers that maybe everyone's going to be like, whoa, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, KJ Hamler. There's a lot of speed in this class. I wonder what the narrative will be on some of these guys after the combine.
I think Judy's thing is his start-stop.
Right.
It's not necessarily that he's a long burner.
Body control, yeah.
It's the fact that you go here, in, out, and beat you in a phone booth and make you fall in a phone booth. That's his trait.
Yep.
I don't really care if he runs 4.2, 4.3, or even 4.4 for that matter.
All right, let's go different side of the ball. Who's your player that you studied over the last week that you really want to talk about?
So I finished up Xavier Mckinney yesterday.
Okay, the Alabama safety.
How is this not safety one in the class? This is everything you want out of a 2020 NFL defensive back safety.
Okay.
I want him down in the box doing everything possible. Dime linebacker, safety, covering slot corners. Or
This is all what he did at Alabama?
Yep.
Because I haven't done McKinney yet.
Equal time, free safety, slot corner, box player. Pretty much dime linebacker, kind of sub-package pressure piece.
Got it.
But I want him guarding slot receivers. You watch him guarding Courtney Davis at Texas A&M or Hunter Renfrow in some of those championship games. You can watch him defending big tight ends in the slot. Grant Calcaterra at Oklahoma last year. He was the MVP of that. Was it the Rose Bowl?
It was the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, defensive MVP of that game. Bunch of big plays. I just think he's everything you want to play in the box in the NFL. He's a great blitzer.
I was just going to bring that up. Yep.
He's got good instincts in the alley. He can't be blocked in the alley. Great sideline-to-sideline speed. He's got great explosiveness. Any sort of perimeter action, screens. He's excellent running the alley, protecting the alley. Dime linebacker, sticking his nose in against the run. The ball skills. Stat sheet filler across the board every year. TFLs, sacks, PBUs, forced fumbles, whatever you want. This guy's loading the stat sheet. He's 6'1", 195, 200 pounds, a little bit undersized for that profile. But he's everything I think Charles Woodson was late in his career for Dom Capers in Green Bay. He's everything I think Malcolm Jenkins has been for the Philadelphia Eagles the past 5 years. That type of player, I think, is what you're getting at Xavier Mckinney, and a day one player every day of the week.
Interesting.
Who's been considered safety one in this class?
It's him and Delpit from LSU.
Yeah, I think Delpit's been the consensus coming into the season, obviously being the Thorpe Award winner. I thought his expectations coming into 2019 left us a little bit, wanting a little bit more out of him, despite winning the best defensive back in the country. But
I feel like more and more mock drafts have McKinney going before Delpit.
It seems that McKinney, like the hot spot for him has been Dallas. What are they, 17 to pair with Xavier Woods, which it seems that they complement each other well, it seems.
Yeah, I've seen Miami, Dallas. I think McShay and Jeremiah had him going to Dallas at 17.
No, it makes sense. And Dallas is a team that typically drafts for need, like almost always drafts for need. So that would be one to keep an eye on. All right, let's go to our big board breakdown. We're going to look at Kyle Krabs from the Draft Network, friend of the show. He's been on numerous times. He released his top 150. Notable rankings here. What are your thoughts? C-Mac, we'll start with you.
So I started from the bottom. I said, let me go all the way down to 150 because the names at the very, very top pretty much the same ones.
And when we're talking 150, really what that means is like, we'll say day 1, day 2. It's like, because it's about 100 picks-ish.
You're probably mid to late day 2, maybe. Could even be early day 3 guys.
Yeah, for 150. Yep.
So I'm scanning up, and the first one that jumped out to me was Matt Pare, the tackle from Connecticut.
Yep.
So got to see him at the Senior Bowl up close. Jason Strowbridge, who you talked about earlier on the show, asked him during the week who was the toughest player you went against. The first name he threw out was Matt Hennessy from Temple.
Yep.
But then he instantly after that went to Pare, which I was quite surprised by. Because, watch him during one-on-ones, and you could see the basketball background. He's very athletic.
Very toolsy, yeah.
Has the size, 6'5", long arms, good fluid mover. I was surprised that you would see him that low with the need. Now, he's coming from smaller type competition. Thought he held his own for the most part during a week of practices at the Senior Bowl. But when you need that position, you need the athleticism, you need those quick feet. I'm a little surprised that you would see someone down there. Maybe he's a little raw. Maybe he needs to be a little more fine-tuned and developed. But I feel like a fourth round, third round was what we're looking at when you're looking about 134.
Yeah.
He came in on the board. Pretty good value there.
Teams are looking for tackles, and to me, Pert is a guy that's got those tools. And if you've got tools at that spot, you're going to get drafted high. You're higher than you would expect. And so Pert was a guy that certainly, I know a lot of people, our friend Dane Brugler, we just had him on, is a big fan of Matt Pert as well. So certainly a name to keep an eye on. Ben, who do you got for us?
Who was a tackle out of UConn, went to the Giants for all those years?
Will Beatty.
That's right.
Good call.
Super
Former Eagles.
Bowl
He got a Super Bowl champion.
That's right.
Yeah,
Cup of coffee over here with us.
Yep.
A couple things stood out. He had Mekhi Becton over Andrew Thomas. Dobbins over Swift kind of stood out to me.
That's interesting, yeah.
Xavier McKinney over Delpit seems to be a pretty popular thing, so Krabs is up on that. But how about Damon Arnett? I see squeezing in here at cornerback number 4 in the group. When he does the big boards, you can't always see where the position's picked.
Right,
So I always like to do a kind of a ranking on who he has.
You do that often, yes.
He has Damon Arnett over Trayvon Diggs and Jeff Gladney.
Wow.
Not saying he's wrong, just something different.
It's a good
you really
conversation.
haven't seen that too much. Trayvon Diggs is really a consensus 2, 3, 4 corner.
I love Trayvon Diggs.
I do as well,
He's so good. He's so good. But Arnett and Gladney, I think, is an interesting pairing because I think they're kind of similar in a lot of ways, a little bit undersized, but scrappy, competitive. I think Gladney a little bit better. But Arnett's a fun player.
Wait till I'm excited to go to Indy and the pre-drill huddles.
Yeah.
And they're giving the instructions. They all come in and all the corners' heads are kind of all together.
Right.
Trayvon Diggs is enormous. He's going to stand out in this group.
Right.
It's going to be really fun to see because he's not only 6'1", he's every bit of it with broad shoulders and a big head and hair that stands up. He's going to look like a freak show receiver among these corners, which he was a former receiver.
He's only played corner for 2 years, 3 years?
He's got long arms and he's going to look really good. He's got long legs, long strides.
There's a play from Trayvon Diggs. I'll post this on Twitter this week. The Mississippi State. He's covering a deep post. I forget who the receiver was. He is in the receiver's hip pocket, and he goes up midfield right on the logo.
It's the one-handed catch?
He goes up Odell Beckham style, one hand, reaches out across his body, comes down. He comes down with it. The only thing, the ground knocks it out, and it was a pass. 3
months ago, you're like, watch this catch. Why does nobody talk about this? I think it ended up being a pick. Because
unbelievable ball skills,
every bit as impressive as the Odell catch, but
no question
from a corner nonetheless.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
But spinning this back to Damon Arnett, a guy that's played a lot of football. Every bit of 5 years at Ohio State with the likes of Connolly and Ward and Marshawn Lattimore and all those guys out there. Interesting career. I thought flashed early on, struggled a little bit, was given that famous 46 number in camp from Urban Meyer, I think 2 years ago, for guys that aren't giving 4 to 6 seconds of effort. And it was kind of put them on notice, we need more from you. And I thought this past year, Ohio State plays a lot of base defense.
Yeah.
And it's not because their linebackers are versatile. It's because their corners are dudes, and their corners will tackle, and their corners are complete football players, whether that's Sean Wade, Arnett, Okudah, Jordan Fuller. And I think the love needs to get spread around. I think Okudah's taken a lot of attention in this group.
Yep.
But Damon Arnett played some good football this year. He's much more consistent. He can play inside, outside. I think his best football has been outside, but he has played in the nickel as well. But a player that when you're talking about a top 5 corner, I think he deserves conversation. I think Kyle putting him at corner 4, not saying he's wrong, but it's an interesting player.
Arnett's a good player. I think he's underrated for sure. The guy that Iowa State in the Big Ten, safety Antoine Winfield, he's got him at number 44 in his top 50. I have not done Winfield yet. But when I look at Winfield, I was watching that Minnesota front 7 because Kamal Martin and Carter Coughlin were both announced for the Senior Bowl. So I'm watching them back in the fall, and this guy, the safety, just keeps flying around making plays. And I'm like, all right, who's this kid? And it's Antoine Winfield Jr., his dad, obviously a former Pro Bowl corner from Minnesota and Buffalo. And he's making big plays. That week is the Minnesota-Penn State game. And I'm watching, it's a highly ranked game, big one of the big, I think it was the big noon kickoff for Fox Sports that week. So I'm watching the game. Sure enough, he has 2 picks in the first half. Should have been 3. He had one that he dropped as well. Again, I haven't studied him, but looks like a guy that's got that sideline to sideline range. I don't know that a lot of people are necessarily talking about him, but really tough tackler. Seems that he's a tough tackler, and he's got that range. An intriguing prospect for sure, based off the surface level stuff I've seen.
I watched a lot of his tape the past 2 weeks, and this Minnesota defense is really good collectively.
Yeah.
Whether it was Thomas Barber or the other linebacker, Carter Coughlin.
Thomas Barber is another Barber, like Marion Barber,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so.
Peyton Barber, I believe.
Peyton Barber, yes, exactly. Yep.
Chris Williamson, Florida transfer, really good nickel player in there. You start looking at this collective defense, and I was expecting big things out of Winfield. He obviously has the high volume interceptions, a couple really flashy ones where he kind of spun around and almost looked like he baited a quarterback into his zone. I just really question his speed and whether he can run. Super instinctual. And I think that put him in some good positions. I'm just not sure he's going to test well. I question his athleticism. Looks a little bit like that kind of stockier, shorter corner.
Yep.
Rather than that.
Like his dad? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Unlike a Xavier McKinney, that's a little skinnier, a little more upright, a little more wiry, looks more explosive in his movements. So I just question the way Winfield's going to look at the combine. But he cashed in at the right time. I think he was already given an extra year of eligibility.
So he's a third-year sophomore, but he was listed as a true sophomore.
Right, that's
because he had the medical red shirt that they didn't even.
But
give
his
him a
stock
red
is as high as it's going to be. The high volume of picks. He is what he is.
Yep.
So let's see what it looks like in shorts and a t-shirt, and where you can kind of stack with the other safeties.
Just don't play Maryland.
Right.
Both of his season-ending injuries the previous 2 years came against Maryland.
Oh, really?
So as long as he doesn't play Maryland,
he's all right.
He's good. But seven interceptions to lead the nation.
He's led the country this year.
You can't. It's tough to ignore that.
Yep.
All right, let's go mock draft roundup. We're gonna go Chad Reuter from NFL.com, and we did an NFL.com mock draft last week, but I felt the need to go back to that well this week because Chad put together a 3-round mock. So anytime we get a 3-round mock, right, I mean we got to break it down, right? So he's got the Eagles also selecting Brandon Ayuk, and we talked about it earlier with Dane. I want to get your guys' thoughts on the Brandon Ayuk selection for the Eagles in round 1, but then also Antoine Winfield. We just got done talking about him. He has the Eagles taking him in round 2, and then Tyler Biadasz, the Wisconsin center, in round 3. C-Mac, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts there on that trifecta from Chad?
Well, I'll start with Ayuk. It's a shame we didn't get to see him at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, that was a kick in the stomach for me. Like I was
bummed.
Really looking forward to seeing him.
You were a kid on the Christmas morning and you just didn't get the gift that he or she wanted.
I know.
So,
I was really hoping to see him.
I remember talking to his teammate, Benjamin,
Yep.
at the Senior Bowl, and was just like explosive, can run away from a defense, can win in the return game. And when you look at the highlights, that's what Ayuk did.
It's a lot of the stuff we said about Debo. Like I think you could say about Ayuk. I think he's kind of built the same way. He was a high school running back, like yards after catch. A lot of similarities there.
The great run after the catch, great tracking ability, uses his hands well. Plays outside, inside, so just a real fun, explosive player that you can add to the offense.
Python. I wrote down before I saw the measurements. He did weigh in Mobile. Pythons for arms, like crazy length for his position. And actually, Jim Nagy highlighted that. I think it was earlier this week. It might have been last week on Twitter. Just the length that he's got for a guy his height. Ben, you talked about Winfield. Have you done Tyler Biadasz yet, the center from Wisconsin?
Yeah, so a couple people told me. I obviously have been onto him for a couple years, very early.
Because he's been talked about for a while.
Right. Stud true freshman, obviously leading the way for Jonathan Taylor and all his records in 2,000-yard season. But a bunch of people said put on his tape late in the year here.
Okay.
Because he really struggled, and he did.
Interesting.
His trajectory started high and has kind of fizzled since then. And I'm just really worried about his athleticism, firstly. I don't think he's particularly quick out of his stance. I don't know if he can really play in his own scheme. Worry about his ability to get out on a screen and some offenses that like to get their centers out on the perimeter. And then his techniques. He lines up almost in a different stance with different hand placement and different feet placement on a down-to-down basis. And some work for him and some don't work for him. And I'm just not sure if it's coaching. I'm not sure if he's doing it himself.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions about him as a prospect right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I have not done Biadish yet. I haven't done Winfield yet. You guys know how I feel about Ayuk. So Ayuk, a very dynamic player. So as always, for this mock draft roundup, we're going to take a look at the 5 that went before the Eagles, the 5 that went after, just kind of see what people are talking about. The 5 before Philadelphia, he's got Atlanta taking A.J. Epinesa, the defensive end out of Iowa. Very good player. I know, Ben, you and I are a big fan of him. Xavier McKinney to Dallas, so we're going back to that well. Andrew Thomas, the talented left tackle from Georgia, going at number 18 to Miami. Las Vegas Raiders taking Patrick Queen, the LSU linebacker, at 19. And Jacksonville taking Notre Dame tight end Cole Kmet at number 20. To me, the big thing that I take away from that group, those 5 players, Patrick Queen. And Ben, I just watched him for the first time yesterday. This guy's really interesting. He's really fun to watch. Sideline to sideline, goal line to goal line, he is running around like a heat-seeking missile. Outstanding speed, outstanding range. All the athletic tools you want. Limited production in coverage, but the coverage tools are great. Like man coverage against backs, check. Ball skills downfield, check. Like really, really impressive
Good
player.
instincts against screens, things like that.
Dude, you watch did you watch the title game, the Clemson?
Sniffed out, I think, 2 screens in that game.
He's really, really good.
Put up ETN.
He's just so small. Like we're talking about like contact, like playing through contact and going back to that conversation. Like, if a blocker gets his hands on him, he really struggles. He bounces off ball carriers often. So, I mean, that's the give and take there is you're getting a dynamic athlete who can play sideline to sideline. He's instinctive. He's tough. Like I wrote down Telvin Smith, who turned into a great player, 4th-round pick. I wrote down Deion Jones, same school, 2nd-round pick for Atlanta. Both guys turned into great players, and I think they share a lot of similarities.
Telvin was so long, though. I mean,
I know.
Telvin had the long arms.
Well,
like
we'll see what Queen comes. We'll see what Queen comes in at.
He just looks like he has short arms. He has more of that stocky barrel chest profile, more like the Jonathan Vilma.
Okay.
And the lanky kind of Telvin, where his arms are long and has a long neck and more of a skinnier profile.
This kid, I was really intrigued by him, but just in the top 20, like that's it. You have to have a plan for him. And going to the Raiders, obviously they have a need a linebacker. There's always
undersized guys that each year that I'm just like, I just wish he was a little bit longer and not nearly the caliber of player, but like Andre Smith out of North Carolina a couple years ago,
sure.
T. Gray Scales out of Indiana. These guys that are kind of stumpy linebackers, you're like, they just don't have the length. I see that with Queen as well.
Yeah.
I worry about that, but I think he's explosive enough. I think he has enough play strength to fight through his lack of physical, gifts.
Yeah.
And he was a guy we talked about in August. He was my SEC defensive sleeper.
Yeah.
And, these names we get you on months earlier if you listen to Journey to the Draft.
Yep.
And he was a guy that played behind Devin White. So he was no secret in LSU kind of circles, but national circles. This was definitely his coming out party as a junior.
Yeah, I was thinking back this morning actually to last year at this time, like Devin White, Devin Bush, I thought were like stud locks, first round,
Bush
high end first round,
like comp for a profile.
But like Bush was heavy handed. Like Bush would come downhill, take on a guard, and throw he'll throw him to the ground. Like Bush was really, really violent. I just don't know if he's got quite that enough.
No, I don't see that type of profile.
But like those two guys, you could say like, all right, like locked and loaded, safe players. Like Isaiah Simmons, we've talked about so much. Like I don't know that he's as safe, as plug and play as those two guys. And Patrick Queen, I think you got the same kind of question. C-Mac, what was your takeaway from that group?
It's actually the player who went before the 5.
Oh, okay.
Henry Ruggs. Going to Denver Broncos.
That seems to be a popular one that people are, because Emmanuel Sanders getting traded away from Denver mid-season to San Francisco. They need that speed threat to pair with Cortland Sutton.
So it's interesting that we're going to have sort of a run on the receivers with Judy, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb went number 4 in this mock draft.
I didn't even see that.
To the Giants.
Yeah.
So if the run's going to start that early, it's that whole debate about, okay, there's a lot of talented, speedy receivers in this draft class, but are you going to be willing to wait, or do you say if there's a guy that you want, do you go get him? Because Ruggs was the popular Eagles mock pick a week or two ago.
No question.
It seems like that's already shifting.
You get a 3rd-round version of Henry Ruggs and KJ Hill. I'm not sure why he's not valued the same way.
Man, KJ Hill's good
player.
I don't know. Have you seen any of the Senior Bowl practice stuff?
Oh, yeah.
The catch that he made on the indoor facility. We were at the practice.
One where he kind of plucked behind. Forget that catch, Fran. He did it in a game this year.
I know. Well, he did it in the games in 2018. Remember the one he made? I think it was Indiana, down the seam, one hand. He looked like Trevon Diggs against Mississippi State.
Fun exercise. In the summer, I think I put like a top 10 receivers of the season. Like, I just want to watch all these guys run hitches and slants. And it was like Judy and Lamb and Ruggs and KJ Hill and Chenault and Rieger. Look at my mentions of the people that say, why is KJ Hill in this group? Why is KJ Hill in this group?
Right.
There seems to be some cloud of contention about his ability as a receiver and that he's not this top caliber
market
player.
share.
I guess so.
Your favorite
This guy's done
term.
nothing but play with multiple quarterbacks, productive, alpha dog receiver. Go watch his high school basketball tapes. He had tons of D1 offers. Could have been a stud basketball player.
Yeah.
One other comment about this big board, or the mock draft from Chad.
Yep.
Tight end Cole Met at Notre Dame is getting tons of love. He was mocked to the Packers in a mock draft the other day by, I think, Matt Miller at 30. Went 20th. Tight end 1 in this group.
Yeah.
I gave him a similar grade to Stanford's Caden Smith.
Okay.
Who ended up being a 6th-round pick last year. And I just do not see the first-round buzz or even day 2 value out of this player.
Yeah, I haven't done Komet yet, so I'll be interested in getting into him. Real quick, the 5 after Philly. Buffalo at 22, taking Yetur Gross-Matos, the pass rusher from Penn State. Ross Blacklock from TCU, the D tackle, going to New England. Jordan Love for the Saints, going 24. Trayvon Diggs at 25 to Minnesota. That's a great scheme fit there for Diggs. DeAndre Swift, the running back from Georgia. Philly kid, going 26 to Miami. For me, 2 weeks in a row, we've seen mock drafts with Jordan Love going to the Saints, and that seems to be a pretty popular pick, I would say, at this point in the process.
It's interesting because on the flip side, there have been a number of reports about with Taysom Hill, about his expanding
He would be
role.
the guy, right, if Drew Brees left.
And even if Drew Brees comes back, they want to expand Hill's role even more.
Yeah.
So that's why, I mean, if that's going to be your guy, your future guy, can you wait till 24 to get him? That's a big question.
I think Dane in his mock draft that we talked about earlier, I think he has the Saints trading up to take
that
Jordan
seems
Love,
like if you're going to go that road, that seems like the
Although the Ravens didn't have to do that for Lamar. Remember they took
I think they jumped back
Hunter
in.
Henry.
They jumped back in, but they took the tight end.
Hunter Henry.
They took not Hunter Henry. They took the South
Hayden
Carolina
Hurst.
Hayden Hurst. Yes, the other double H.
Yeah,
they took Hayden Hurst first in the first round, and then traded back up for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
The other one you had a point as well from those final 5. Tristan Wirfs.
It's that Tristan Wirfs is still on the board. He goes after this group of 5. He went to Seattle. And speaking of that Move the 6 podcast, Daniel Jeremiah says that he could go as high as 4. Like, he'll be in the conversation with the Giants because of what Dave Gettleman likes in the offensive lineman. So it's the fact that he could be as high as a top 5, but in this mock by fellow NFL.com companion goes all the way beyond the 5 after the Eagles pick.
Wirfs is pretty impressive. I know you've studied Wirfs.
Oh, I love Wirfs.
Yeah.
It's great. Bit of a throwback.
Yeah.
People think because of that he needs to slide inside the guard just because he looks like a refrigerator. You know, he's kind of he's built like a block. He is. I comped him with Chris Samuels. Remember Chris Samuels in the Washington Redskins?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of a ho-hum, strong hands, country strong guy. That's Wirfs. He doesn't look like he has the athletic profile. This guy gives you no reason to think he can't play in space or hang with any sort of speed on the edge.
Don't forget, too, he was Bruce Feldman's #1 freak on the freak list this summer.
Yes.
Keep that in mind.
Don't question this guy's play strength.
No question. All right, so great stuff there from you guys. We're going to get into our next segment now. Pick 6. We're going to talk about guys that have some eye-popping production next up in Pick 6.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
All right, so for Pick 6, again, we're going to go over guys that have stood out from a production standpoint. And so, guys, the way that I presented it to you two was it could be career-long production. It could be a season-long production from just last year. Just any kind of player where a number stood out. So, Ben, we'll start with you. Who's a player that you want to bring up?
So we already kind of talked about Xavier Mckinney and his ability to load up the stat sheet. This guy's got sacks, TFLs, picks, PBUs, forced fumbles. So we'll put him to bed. But how about receiver Michael Bandy?
Who is Michael Bandy?
A little bit of an unknown guy. University of San Diego.
Very much an unknown guy.
Yep. FCS, first team All-American, I think the past 2 years. Listen to these numbers the past 2 years. 150 catches, 2,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, wins inside, wins outside, double moves, really good at the catch point, surprisingly competitive for his size. He's only 5'11", 190. Will win with back shoulders, really sudden after the catch, slot fades, 31 plays of 20-plus yards in 2018. So he's a guy with big play production. Did a lot of things that kind of Taywan Taylor did at Western Kentucky.
Speaking my language.
Outside.
Yep.
Bit of an Eagles comp here as well. Kevin Curtis.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yep. Not really a true slot receiver profile because he had the long speed as well to win down the field with good double moves, but that's kind of who I see. I'm not sure where he gets drafted. He's probably a 4.55, 4.6 type of guy.
Right.
Not quite as big as a Cooper Kupp. To be that slot type of presence, but a guy, if he tests well, could sneak into a day 3.
Interesting. All right, well, C-Mac, what do you got here?
Well, I have a receiver as well. I'll save him for my second go-around. So I'll go with the player we discussed earlier in the show, and that's Chase Young of Ohio State.
It's a good one.
Was suspended for 2 games for a completely ridiculous reason and still set the school record with 16.5 sacks this season.
In 12 games.
16.5 sacks in 12 games, knowing that even though they have Devon Hamilton, a very good player, who's the guy you're game playing every week? Right. He was the guy. It's not like a year you have Nick Bosa, teams have to worry about. It's Chase Young, so you have to get after him. Finished his career with 30.5 sacks, second in Big Ten history. The 16.5 sacks, by the way, led the nation this year, despite missing the 2 games. The 30.5 sacks, 3 seasons, second in Big Ten history. Our boy Brandon Graham gets knocked down the 4th in Big Ten conference history. 7 forced fumbles as well. Has veteran NFL players, tweeting his praises on Twitter. He's one of those must-watch guys on Saturday. So even though I know he's going to be a top 5, possibly top 2 selection, I have to give a tip of the cap just for the unbelievable season he had.
I'm going to stick in the Big Ten for mine, and I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor, the running back out of Wisconsin. Look, he's had 2 straight seasons of over 2,000 yards rushing. Fastest player in college football history to 5,000 yards rushing. His numbers were outstanding. Now, that also comes with a caveat. He's touched the ball 661 times over the last 2 seasons, so there's a lot of wear and tear on the body over the last couple of years, especially really over the course of his career. But this is a guy, honestly, I think that we talked about him back in the summer, Ben. A lot of people kind of view him as just like this, this grinder. He's big, he's physical. It's Monte Ball, it's Ron Dane, it's Wisconsin, right? Dude, he's gonna have a great combine, and I think that's where people are gonna start talking about him more in that top 50, top 40, maybe even top 32 range after Indianapolis. I just feel like he's gonna go out, he's gonna run 4.4, 4.38 or something like that, and he's gonna put up crazy numbers in all the tests, and now everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, that's right, and he's crazy productive, and he's a great kid and all that.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to jump the way Saquon did.
Yeah.
But I think in a straight line, in the drills, and he's going to be able to put on those high shorts and show off those quads and the hamstrings. He's got a really good-looking lower half. His butt's really well-defined and huge legs, just like Saquon did. He's going to look good out there.
Yeah.
For anybody that thinks he doesn't have some straight-line speed because he's some ho-hum back from Wisconsin, go look up his 100-meter numbers from high school in New Jersey.
2-time state champ.
As like a side hobby, he pretty much did because he was doing nothing in the springtime. So, what the heck? Let me go win the 100-meter champion and stayed in New Jersey.
It's crazy.
Definitely straight line speed, the production. Like you said, the wear and tear is the big concern.
All right, who's your second guy?
We'll stay off the beaten path again a little bit.
You love staying off the beaten path.
Well, you just picked Chase Young and Jonathan Taylor. He just broke the rushing record, number 2 overall pick. Low-hanging fruit here, guys. Deep running back class.
Okay.
We're not going Power 5 guys here, right? SMU player, Xavier Jones.
Okay. Reminds
me a lot of Devin Singletary at FAU last year. Really carved out a nice role with the Buffalo Bills. They had no problem saying goodbye to LaShawn McCoy because of that. 25 touchdowns this year. This year alone, 25 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, also had a 1,000-yard campaign, I think as a sophomore in 2017, but a guy with a lot of wiggle in the open field. Everybody's looking for that scat back on third down. All-encompassing, Devin Singletary last year, Florida Atlantic, very, very similar player, explosive juice, a third down back.
Interesting. All right, well, C-Mac, where are you at here?
I went with his teammate, James Prochet.
Oh, all right. Nice.
I was like SMU. Tied for the nation's lead, Justin Jefferson with 111 receptions, finished his career with 301. The last player to have more than 300 was Xavier Jones, who has the all-time NCAA record with 399. And I saw that, and I'm like, they couldn't have manufactured a 400th catch.
Right.
They couldn't figure a way. Just get one more for him. But I also picked him because we saw him at the Senior Bowl. It was fun watching him in the 101, savvy route run.
He had a good week, and we figured out his name is Prochet, not Proche.
Yes, Prochet.
That over the consistently over the past 2 weeks, thinking he had
It just shifted.
Kumbaya with the media to explain the.
It was Prochet, which is phenomenal.
Well, at least it happened now and
Yes.
not months down the road. So
I don't feel like I saw any clips or highlights. Obviously, KJ Hill and Gandy Golden and Mims.
Mims,
stole the
yeah.
show, but
Watching him on film for the practice sessions, I mean, showed the same kind of snap, the same confidence
watched
in his
his tape a
hands.
couple months ago.
Yeah, we watched him together. But I mean, C-Mac and I went into the film room and watched him in Mobile, and the same kind of snap on his routes, same kind of confidence in his hands. He's not going to go run 4.4. Like that's
Right.
not what he's going to do in a few weeks. But slot receiver, like all day.
aside from that 4.4 ability, we saw a similar type of Sterling Shepard type of player.
Yes.
But Sterling was able to separate himself with that extra gear.
I remember I think I wrote down Jamison Crowder.
Yeah,
after watching.
Yeah, I think we saw that
yeah.
type of slot presence.
Yep.
he's just not flashy. Not
Right.
super flashy to the other guys, which is
Right.
He's
fine.
been a ho-hum, He's
Yeah.
just a quarterback's best friend.
Yeah.
He could end up being a Danny Amendola for somebody.
Yeah. So for my sixth one, I went with I don't want to say off the beaten path. I went with Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback from Alabama.
I've heard of him.
So look, we talk all about like yards and touchdowns and things like that. A couple of numbers that I just kind of keep track of year to year with quarterbacks: touchdown interception ratio and yards per attempt. Just gonna give a sense of like, all right, like what kind of production are these guys putting up? How efficient are they? Yards per attempt, 10.9 yards per attempt for Tua. That's the highest of any quarterback drafted in the last decade. Like, obviously crazy production. And it hasn't all been downfield. It has been a lot of quick slant, yards after catch. So a lot of that goes to the receivers and to the offense as well. But 10.9 yards per attempt. And then his touchdown interception ratio, 7.91. Also the highest of any quarterback in the last 10 years. So, to me, like I'm not one to point to these because I think that with quarterback production, it's as much about the offense and the situation and the receivers and all that. But when those two numbers are higher than any quarterback in the last decade that's been drafted, I take notice.
They have two phases, yaks and shots.
Right.
Give it out quick, make somebody miss. Let's take our shots down the field. And that's a great design to an offense.
Yep.
When you want to take calculated shots, make it off of play action, well protected, tight splits, let guys get free releases. When you want to get it out quick into the hands of the playmakers and make something happen.
No, I think with, again, like I said, quarterback production overall doesn't move the needle a ton for me.
Right.
But when in certain spurts, I think it's just an interesting way to kind of tell a story, and certainly with Tua, I think that's an interesting one. All right, let's go to our last segment now. It's time to get to some questions from you guys at home. It's time for Draft Mailbag.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, so again, like I said at the top of the show, the best way to support us to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. I wanted to give a shout out to someone who did exactly that, and that's RJ Field 11, left a 5-star review, and he said, thanks for all that you do. Your shows are always must listen. Can you compare and contrast? And guys, I think this is going to be a pretty consistent question. I just feel like we're going to see this a lot over the course of the spring. Can you compare and contrast Henry Ruggs from Alabama, KJ Hamler from Penn State, and Jalen Reagor from TCU, and explain why the consensus seems to have them in that order? Keep it up. Ben, I look to you first.
All right, so that was Reagor.
So it was Reagor,
Yep.
Hamler, and Ruggs.
Reagor and Hamler we went into last week.
We talked
on
about
the
them last week.
podcast.
Right.
Yes. And the week
So-
before.
Just quick elevator speech profile. Hamler, extremely undersized, electric speed, electric in and out of breaks, questionable hands.
Yep.
Questionable tracking, questionable play strength.
See, I thought the tracking was pretty good. I liked the track. He did have drops, though.
Yes, there were some concentration drops. There was some contested catch drops.
Right.
So if we're pecking the concerns,
Yes.
What do you think of the Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown comparison?
I
That
thought
one I've
Brown was
seen.
just a much more confident player with his hands, and that he
I'd
never
agree.
struggled to pluck it away from his body, rarely double caught it, knew that if he had to trap it in his chest, he could do it confidently.
Because of the size. That's
Similar size.
that's the thing.
that's
Profile
easy
people
one.
want to kind of project and to think you're getting that. I'm just not sure he's as polished with his hands. Much more of a Will Fuller out of Notre Dame, who had
Right.
similar type of hand issues. Then it was Rieger, who played outside the numbers at TCU, even though he has the profile of a slot and a gadget player that I think he'll be used close to the formation in the NFL. Electric speed, competitive player. Another guy that had some concentration drops in his career.
Yep.
I think he's more aggressive going for the ball.
Exactly.
You see the contested
He
catch
will
ability
attack the ball
with
in
him
the air,
more than
high
Hamler.
pointed. I think he has more of an alpha profile than KJ Hamler.
And to me, the big difference was the passing games for TCU. The quarterback was, the passing game was dreadful.
Yeah.
So
True freshman.
He'd create separation, Rieger, and would win at the top of the route, and the ball would take 10 seconds to get there.
Yeah.
He was forced to be that contested catch guy. He was forced to have to go up and attack it, or else he wasn't getting
the
there.
offensive scheme. I watch a lot of red zone stuff. It would be high red zone, opposite hash, Rieger outside the numbers, Big 12, off coverage, and you're throwing him a fade to a 5'11 receiver.
Yep.
That's a long throw against off coverage. Before the play even starts, I don't like it.
Right.
So it's that type of profile. That's how Tavon Austin was used with the Rams when he got into the NFL.
Right.
Right off the bat, before the play even starts, I don't like it. So Rieger, I think his best football is ahead of him. I think his best use is ahead of him as well.
Yeah, I think if he goes to the right team, he could be Tyreek Hill. He could be that guy for an offense. He could also go somewhere and be just a gadget guy. I think it'll take the right mind to really leverage the most out of him. It really is the case for all three of these guys. Rieger, to me, he's got inside-outside versatility. He can win at all three levels. The flashes are really, really strong.
And this is a little bit cheap, and this is a little bit of a cop-out. If you put Jalen Rieger on Alabama Crimson Tide, you're getting Henry Ruggs.
Right. Yep.
You're going to get that use, that type of player, that profile. There's plenty of plays where Rieger's running downfield to be excited, to lay a block, to show off his speed wherever he can, just like Ruggs. Good teammate and everything I've heard about, competitive player. I think if he went to an offense like Alabama, you're talking about a similar player.
Only one of these three guys' father played in the NFL and played for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Dun, dun,
That was Jalen Rieger. His dad was Monte Rieger, the defensive tackle. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Jalen Rieger's his dad played in the NFL. All right, so then Henry Ruggs. We talked about him a little bit at the top. Electric speed, just like the other two guys. More of a slants, shallows, deep post, vertical stuff. The vertical go routes. You saw all of that with Henry Ruggs.
Yeah, yards after catch guy, competitive special teams, punt gunning.
Yep.
Running down interceptors after plays. Did a game last year. Irv Smith fumbled going to the end zone. 60 yards down the field, it was Ruggs running down the field, falling on it. Little things like that. You want him on your football team.
Yep.
Where you ask him to win, he's probably not an outside the numbers receiver, trying to beat a press corner on a down-to-down basis. But if you look at the way Debo's used, Randall Cobb's been used, those types of players, that could be a Henry Ruggs for him.
I did write down, especially in terms of build and the way Ted Ginn.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's and Ginn. I know he didn't live up to 7th overall or whatever that Miami took him at, but has played in the league for a long, long time.
Yeah.
He's been a good player.
These are the types of players you just want easy offense.
Right.
And when you're talking about the profile of the TCU offense, small receiver, outside the number, low percentage pass play, that's not easy offense. And the NFL is leaning a little bit more towards the easy offense, spread systems, things like that, the way Debo is used. Give them the ball. These guys are talented, they're strong, they're fast. Offense doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah.
Let's put them in better positions to do what they do best.
I just think back to Hamler for a second. I go back to his college debut against Appalachian State,
Right.
where game's on the line, he gets a kick return, gets it to midfield, and he even delayed coming out of the end zone because it's like, oh, do I return? So it's like, no, we need a big play. I got to take this out.
Yeah.
And then he ties the game with an impressive catch over the middle field, good contested catch there. Defender was draped on him. That's when you talk about the alpha dog, the big play type thing. That's what you get from Hamler.
Listen, I hope he turns into a Taylor Gabriel.
Right.
If he comes up with 3 catches for 110 in a game, that's a great game for him.
Right.
I just don't know if that value is a first-round receiver for such a niche role. And this is the issue that Falcon fans have with Calvin Ridley right now. That is what he is. He's the big play threat. He's really not that possession receiver. Now they're like, why did we take him so early if he's not going to develop his game? So it's a lot of what are you asking him to do based on that draft slot. I think is part of the picture.
The play that you mentioned that first year with Hamler, that Ohio State quick slant was a 90-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
Like, you're outrunning everybody on Ohio State.
Yeah.
Like, all right, like this guy's got playmaking potential. Look, we've seen guys with speed. You mentioned Will Fuller. We've seen John Ross, Tavon Austin. Like those guys just go high. Like it's a big play league. Teams are looking for big plays. Like KJ Hamler has the ability to make big plays. And to me, the second part of this question was, why do you think that the consensus has been that that's the order? Ruggs, Hamler, Rieger. I think Ruggs because of Alabama, right? We've seen him on the big stage. Hamler after the second big stage, and Rieger just didn't have it. If Rieger if you had taken his sophomore and junior years and flipped them, because he was much more productive as a sophomore when quarterback play was a little bit better, I think that we might be having a little bit of a different discussion. Right now, I think it might change here in a few weeks.
And it's fun to talk about because I think KJ Hamler is just as electric in and out of breaks as Jerry Jeudy.
Right. He's
wicked routes in and out of break, maybe even quicker than Jerry Jeudy.
Right. I think he is quicker.
And there are some plays where you watch the break and the ball is coming to him, just stop the tape. If he catches it clean, he's gone.
Right.
And like that Ohio State play, that little slant.
See ya.
Gone.
Yeah.
But occasionally that double catch lets that defender grab him by the ankles.
Or the jump at the catch point.
That type of thing too, which we watch all the time, and it really slows you down and hinders your ability to run after the catch. If he can polish up the hand stuff, he's going to be dangerous.
All right, so the next question comes from Juju Fay. 5-star review again. Really appreciate the support, guys. Where do you think the Birds will go in rounds 1 and 2? Who are 3 guys that they could grab at those spots with their needs? So here's what I'm going to say. We won't ever answer that question, right? Because we're not like we don't have the ability to say first of all, we don't have the knowledge to say like here's who the Eagles are going to take. We have no idea who the Eagles are going to take.
The Eagles don't know who they're going to take.
The Eagles don't know who they're going to take, and about who they should take. Like it's a difficult question to answer, but here's what I'll say. We're always going to talk about prospects, and we're always going to talk to other people who are saying who the Eagles could take. And so here's what I'm saying for next week. A couple weeks from now, we're going to have our Combine preview episode. Next week, we're kind of in that in between. We're still trying to figure out a little bit of Combine. Next week, I think we take the episode, and I want to take this segment, the Draft Mailbag, and really expand it. So we're going to tell all of you guys at home, go on, fill out a mock draft for the Eagles. It could be 1 round, it could be 3 rounds, it could be 7 rounds. Go on to Apple Podcasts, go on to Stitcher, wherever you listen, leave us a rating and leave us a comment. And in the comments section, put that mock draft in there, and we will break it down on the show. There might be 40 of those bad boys. We're going to break them down.
Take a look. We'll go.
All right, so we'll comment on them. So that's the homework for everybody at home. Go on wherever you listen, leave us the rating, leave us a comment with your mock draft, and we'll kind of talk it through. We'll see.
Make it easy.
About the prospects.
Ben wants easy offense,
That's easy content.
Exactly.
There we go. So we'll do that next week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Until then, we will see you next week here on the show. Thanks for listening once again.